Hey, Inspired Tribe. How's it going? Welcome to another Inspired Conversation. My name is Jean Nolan, and I'm thrilled to welcome a very, very special man, wonderful man, Dr. Mercola. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a great privilege and pleasure to be with you today.
Oh, the privilege is ours. And Doc, I'll say this the way I see it. In today's day and age, if the mainstream fights you, it's almost a badge of honor, a seal of approval for truth and authenticity. And you and your work have been fought by the mainstream for way longer than just the past 2 years.
That's for sure.
But coming from a field, mainstream medicine like you are, when was the moment for you? Because it's, the list of your accomplishments is extremely long, whether we talk about the scientific studies that you wrote, whether we talk about the many books that you wrote, including the last one that's, or the most recent one, The Truth About COVID-19, Exposing the Great Reset, Vaccine Passports, and a New Normal. There's such a long list of accomplishments. But what was the defining moment for you to kind of steer away from mainstream medicine into the holistic, natural approach that you have taken over the past decades?
Well, that's a excellent question. I was brainwashed in my 7 years of medical school training and postgraduate residency training. And for the first 5 years, I was basically a drug prescribing doctor and vaccine prescribing doctor. And then ultimately, even though I was interested in health, massively interested in health, I started exercising in 1968, which is interesting, the first year that I also took a programming class, which explains some of the success I've had, because I've been an advocate of technology for a long, long time. And I was a really early adopter of the internet and had my site, which has been out there for over a quarter of a century. We started our site before Google started theirs, actually. And but the interest came in the early 90s when I got the bullet and then started recognizing that there's other physicians who understood this, and there's a network. And basically for once, twice, sometimes every weekend in a month, I'd be traveling somewhere to learn this, because it wasn't taught in any school. You have to learn it for yourself. And then there was journals and such you can read, but getting real world experience from practicing clinicians in the trenches was how I acquired the information. And then I started sharing it with my patients, and then my reputation was amazing. I started seeing people from all over the state of Illinois, then all over the country, and then they started flying in from all over the world. It was crazy. But because the stuff works, it's natural foundational principles that address the core reason why people are getting sick. And conventional medicine rarely, if ever, does that. It's been captured for over 100 years, over a century, 110 years when they did the Flexner report in 1910. And they basically abolished natural medicine from the practice of conventional medicine. It's not really taught in schools. It may be a few hours in some institutions, but basically abandoned. And you wind up essentially becoming a slave to the system and memorizing these protocols and what drug is assigned for each specific constellation of symptoms.
Well, you just touched on something that's really important and something that I hope our viewers, will appreciate. You said something right now that when you are a doctor in mainstream medicine, and whether you work for a hospital or in any other capacity, you don't have the freedom that you might think you have. You're bound to protocols that are usually written by insurance companies and the pharmaceutical complex, which explains why over the especially past 2 years, we've seen such a illogical deviation from otherwise working protocols in the treatment of these patients. How was your exit from that world? Because, as I said in the beginning, once you exit this realm, once you steer away from that, you become a sworn enemy of the system. The system fights you because first of all, you're treating with success, but you're not really treating anymore. You're showing people how to heal, and then they're not dependent on the system that needs that dependency to survive. So Did you feel immediately that that was going to there was going to be a lot of backlash and a lot of fight in that, or did that kind of come over the years?
It was gradual over the years, but before I answer your question, there's a bit of information you probably aren't aware of, and many others, so I'll mention it now. And when I mention slave, it really is, because a lot of people don't understand, realize that unless you're independently, your family is independently wealthy, or you've inherited a lot of wealth, you're going to come out of medical school with a minimum of $250,000, and more likely close to $500,000 in debt. So what that means is there's no way in the world, even the smartest entrepreneur is going to be able to obtain the funds to establish a medical practice and survive when there's paying a debt on $500,000. It just doesn't work. And when I graduated, I think I graduated like $40,000 or $50,000 in debt, and was fortunate enough to have an alliance in collaboration with a local hospital that subsidized me my first year and was successful. But very few people did it. And back then, and that was 35 years ago, and it's much, much worse now. So almost everyone coming out of school is working for someone. So they're really at the mercy of those they're working for. And it's just, even though they may not agree with this, they have to do it, or they're fired. They lose their license. They can't feed their families. They can't pay the rent. They're on the street. So it's a real dilemma that now in medicine. So I just wanted to emphasize that you were right, even more than you suggested. But with respect to my transition to conventional medicine, it was really interesting. It was like mid-90s. The light bulbs went off, and I said, there is no way I can continue to do this type of medicine. So I wrote a letter to all my patients, and I said, unless you are willing to walk with me and commit yourself to going off of all your medications, you need to find a new doctor. 75% of my patients left, 75%. And it sounds like a bad thing, right? It was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I only had people who are willing to work. And if you have people who are really committed to doing what it takes to improve their health, they got better. Word spread like wildfire, and I got my practice blew up, and really was very successful because I was only working with committed people. I would not take anyone into the practice who wasn't willing to work on this. So it was a hard decision to make, but I'm so glad I did it.
Well, we're so glad you did it. We're so glad, because the world, as I said, 15 million visitors on your website every month, and that's probably not including all the social media traffic and all.
Oh, I think it's probably closer to 30 million now.
So 30 million. This is a huge impact.
Yeah, it is. It is such a privilege to be able to do this. I am in tears, because I've been teaching this thing for over a quarter century, and the stories I get when people go out and lecture, or emails. I mean, it's just the lives that have been changed. I probably reached hundreds of millions of people, and you never hear like way less than 1/10% of the impact you've had, because I'm at home working and stuff. I don't see patients, so but it is humbling to see that type of impact. It really is.
Well, and in the way you work and the way you work with people, it doesn't just, the success story doesn't end with healing whatever problem they might have had when they came to you. It is also inspiring a consciousness shift when it comes to health and the holistic view of it. And in my own story, I used to be a professional athlete, an alpine skier. And at age 15, 16, I had such huge back problems, and was literally, during the season, I was literally on painkillers or pain shots all the time. And I realized at the end of that season, at 16, that my body would not tolerate this any longer, that there had to be another way. And the universe, the creator, sent me a different direction. And I really explored energy healing. But later on, and this is where it moves into your field, I started working, my wife introduced me to an amazing osteopath in Austria. And I really, really began to appreciate and love the field of osteopathy, because it's within mainstream, the most holistic, at least in my view, the most holistic approach. And usually, at least in my experience, osteopaths tend to have a much broader view and spectrum of healing and the body. If you shift into today's day and age, with your experience with decades now of being in this field, do you see that there is a shift in the mass consciousness, or is it more okay, there's one side of society that's really going the hardcore mainstream medicine medication route, and then there's another side of society that is moving over into a natural holistic view that includes emotions, includes emotional healing and all the other things you talk about?
Well, I think the last 2 years has shown us the underbelly of the beast, and that they've been using very clever, very sophisticated strategies to essentially brainwash the people. And the new term now is by Matthias Desmet is mass formation. And it really is. It is an absolute effective brainwashing, more effective than any previous strategy in the history of the world. And largely because of the technological tools that have been developed, social media and such, and their ability to penetrate these. So I can't give you percentages because I have not done that type of analysis or know someone or studied someone who has, but my gut feeling is it's at least 1/3 to 40% of the population are beginning to understand this. And I think the number has increased quite dramatically because of what they've done. The lies are so blatant, so outrageous that it's able to penetrate this. So it's interesting. And the way the statistics are being manipulated and changed and suppressed and the censoring, they were doing that all along and people didn't know it. In some ways it's good because this is catalyzing this shift that people can understand the truth. But when you get these things right and you stay away from these poisons that have been implemented in their diet. I mean, the food industry is almost as bad as big pharma. It's only because they've sabotaged everything. And big pharma. I'm convinced it's intentional. Big food probably knows, but their primary motive in both cases is the finances and to reap the profits. But what they've done with the food system is just implement strategies that provide us with cheap, convenient foods that decimate our health. And when you choose to engage in that, you're going to get sick. There's just no way. Your body was never designed to be exposed to that. We're eating foods that have never existed in the history of the world before.
Well, that aren't even foods. We shouldn't even call them that.
Well, they're technically foods. They'll keep you alive, but they will rapidly accelerate your movement towards leaving this planet, which ultimately in the scheme of things isn't necessarily such a bad thing anyway, because it's all temporary. And, we have a bigger, broader perspective, as long as we're doing our best when we're here, I think that's what matters. But you don't have to be afraid about death. I mean, a lot of people are, but once you understand the reality of it, that fear disappears.
I agree. I would like to go a little bit into some questions around COVID and subsequently the vaccine. But before we do that, you said you think the pharmaceutical strategy is intentional, and probably the food strategy is intentional, at least in my research. And that's always subjective. It's always one perspective. The one field that has been studied more than anything else is human behavior and human psychology. Nothing has been more studied than that. And I think it's to the end that if you understand human psychology, human behavior, you understand how to manipulate it and how to subsequently control it. So if we add up everything, what our media does, what the politicians do, finance does, what medicine does, pharmaceuticals, food industry does, it is basically disabling our natural abilities in many ways, how to properly think, how to properly be healthy, how to properly function as spiritual and physical beings. And if you come to that conclusion, there must be an intention. So there must be a bigger force behind that intends to do that. And what has been your experience in living a healthy life? And I've been following you on Instagram. You live a very healthy life. You're very, very fit. You do amazing things, and it's obvious and visible. But what has been your experience as a breaking free from that? How did that change your life? How did it change the quality of everyday life, of your relationships, and how you view the world and how you view life?
Interesting. This is not a new strategy for me. thankfully, and I'm not sure why, maybe it was one of the reasons I was brought to this world. I mean, because of past lives and such, I kind of was like targeted for this time. But ever since I can remember, literally, I started running in 1968. And when I started running, people were throwing rocks and cans at me because the only people who ran were criminals. They thought I was running away from a crime. So, early on, I learned to be a rebel. And then, of course, running took off. And it was a mistake in retrospect. I should have never engaged in running. Well, maybe a little bit of running, but I did it for way too long, for like over 4 decades. And I started to understand the importance of resistance training, which is one of the valuable things about health is you need exercise. And so many people get that confused. They think, we're confused like me. They go to the gym, they hop on the treadmill or the bike, and they think they're getting workout. Yeah, it's better than nothing, but your body needs muscle mass. Especially as you get older. Both of my parents died from frailty, the lack of muscle mass and sarcopenia. And it's sad to see. But if you don't engage in regular movement and lifting heavy things, you're just, because the normal tendency is to decrease over time, but unless you're engaging in a strategy to counteract that. So if you want to stay healthy, and then that actually leads to metabolic health too, because when you have more muscle mass, you increase these receptors on your cells, specifically your muscle cells. It's called GLUT4, and that sucks the sugar from your food into your muscles. So it's a glucose sink so that you don't get high blood sugar levels and secondary high insulin levels. So it has loads of metabolic benefits, and it helps reduce insulin resistance and weight gain. And it's just shocking, John, that we're at 45% of the population in this country, 45% are obese today. We're heading towards half the population by the end of the decade, 50%. That's not overweight. That is obese.
Yes.
2 different things. So, and it's just a reflection of engaging in these things. And so exercise is important, but you can exercise till the cows come home. If you're eating bad foods, and most people think sugar is a bad food, and yeah, processed foods, and especially sugar, is not that great. But what's even worse than sugar? It literally, in my view, is 10 times worse. And almost everyone watching this is consuming 10 times as much as their ancestors did 150 years ago.
Grain?
Partially.
Okay.
It's what's in the grain.
Mm-hmm.
It's the seed oils, the vegetable oils, because they all most all of them come from grain, like soy, sunflower, corn, canola. And when you have industrially processed that, you create a very cheap oil that's really high in this specific fat called linoleic acid that's highly susceptible to oxidative damage and radically accelerates damage to all the tissues in your body, because these fatty acids they're susceptible to breaking down and causing free radicals, which damages your cell membranes, your stem cells, your mitochondria, your DNA, and it accelerates death and disease and ultimately death. So, and our population is consuming 10 to 20 times as much as we did before we developed the ability to process these oils. So, because when you eat sugar, your blood sugar gets a spike. And if you have muscles, it won't spike that high, but muscle mass rather, but it's gone. It's not going to bother you tomorrow. But when you have vegetable oils, it stays in your cells. It gets embedded in your cell membranes for 7 years. 7 years. So it's a nightmare on steroids. It's the worst thing that people eat. And the problem is we're sort of early on in our understanding of this. Very few people who understand health would say that seed oils are healthy, but most of them have no clue how unhealthy they are. And I get books written I interview a lot of the top health people in the world. And even many of them, and I'm not going to name names, but I've had to refuse doing interviews with them because they didn't understand this concept. And their whole book was focused on tangents that was detracting from this fundamental truth and confusing people about what was really important, because you only have so much time, so you have to focus on certain things, and literally getting these seed oils out of your life, which isn't obvious, the oils that you buy, but in all processed foods, essentially, or most restaurants food, any sauces, any anything they cook with, if they're cooking it, they're going to use seed oils. If you fry your eggs, they're going to fry them in canola oil, you know? So you have to be hyper vigilant or diligent and very assiduous, almost obsessive compulsive to really avoid these things and get it down to a level where you're not going to have damage from it. And the cool thing about this is when you engage in these things and do other strategies we can talk about, you develop a resilience. And you improve the mitochondrial function of almost every cell in your body. And the result of that improvement, you're more susceptible to opening and expanding your consciousness, because it's really hard to be conscious fully when you're unhealthy and your cells are not working the way they were designed to. So it's really a perfect strategy to engage in everything, because I couldn't agree more. It's the psychological component is so helpful, which is why I love your channel. I watch your channel all the time. I love what you do on these inspirational quotes, and you've had many from Robert Malone and others that, I mean, they're so good. I mean, just you do it very, very well. And I just really, I don't know of another channel out there like yours that does what it does, and I'm really have an affinity for the spiritual approaches that you're suggesting, because I think they're really spot on. And I don't know specifically what they're, because I haven't studied them, but they're aligned what I've learned over the years.
Thank you so much for that. What you said is really what it is, and what we've realized is that this is a potentially almost a magical construct, this body. Mm-hmm. It is a magical construct. I mean, we cannot 100%. Replicate it, not even close. And if people call about artificial robots and artificial life, doesn't even come close to this beautiful construct here. But the truth is, and I can see this so easily and observe this with myself. If and I love raw foods, but if my diet really gravitates towards raw foods, I get sharper, I have more energy, I feel better, and it simply, everything becomes clearer. Whereas, you know, if I go out and have pasta and pizza or whatever, some stuff like that, it just completely shifts my body energy, but which is even more important in the short term, because it's only ever short term for me that I gravitate toward a food like that. My mind gets clouded. I cannot think as clearly, as fast, and which I usually do. But people don't make that connection. And you just said it. Very, very few doctors ever make that connection. And even in the natural field, the ability to think, to make decisions, to become clear, and also to really connect with higher consciousness, because ultimately that's what guides us in our decisions. That's the best doctor.
Well, should guide you. It typically doesn't. Usually we're led by the ego.
Exactly. And no offense, but that is the best doctor. Higher consciousness is what guides you when you give us this knowledge and wisdom. So this is such an important thing to understand, but I do want to point out everyone now, because you've said it so clearly, please go deeper into the seed oils and the effects of that, and also how you can spot where it's being used. I think you live in Florida, right?
Yeah, I do.
So Florida. We live in Tennessee, and in the South, everything's fried. So we kind of know that this is everywhere. So please, Inspired Tribe, go.
Now, there's a few broad principles, because I could lecture for hours on this, but the broad principle is you want to avoid all processed foods. That's the general term. So that includes, when they say that, people don't make the connection, or rarely ever make the connection. That also includes restaurant food. There's very, very, very few restaurants that make healthy food. Fundamentally, I mean, if for whatever reason you're forced or choose to go to a restaurant, another health principle is to restrict your eating window to like 6 or 8 hours. And I usually eat from like 9 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon, so that usually I'm not eating, going out to dinner. And socially, when I travel and I'm lecturing at different events, you know, there's typically engagements, but I typically don't eat. I drink some sparkling water and I'm fine. But if for some reason I choose to, and you're going to the restaurant, I will give you some simple principles. First of all, you want to have a healthy food. If it's cooked or fried, baked, you have to make sure that the only fat that they can use on there is butter. Butter is a safe fat. Don't take any salad dressing, any olive oil, because olive oil, especially in a commercial restaurant, is almost, I would say 90 to 100% of the time is going to be adulterated. So olive oil by itself is not a great food. It's not a superfood that they want you to think it is, because 20% of it is linoleic acid, which is okay if you have a tablespoon. But the problem is 80%, and I said maybe 100% in most restaurants, is going to be contaminated and adulterated with things like safflower oil. So it's 70, 80% linoleic acid. So you want no olive oil in a restaurant, no salad dressings, and make sure they only cook with butter. In fact, if I go out with friends, I tell them, I play a game with them. I have fun with it. I said, listen, this is my friend. I show my phone. We've got 911 on speed dial. If he or she gets any vegetable oil in their food, you're going to have to call the ambulance. They have this severe anaphylactic reaction, and they could possibly die. And your restaurant does not want the publicity from this. So you got to go back there. You got to ask the cook. You got to watch him cook with this. Otherwise, there's going to be huge problems. So you got to engage yourself with your server so that you can convince them to be your advocate in the kitchen, because you're not going back in there. Someone's got to watch the cook and see what they're doing. Now, if you don't want to go through that, fine. I don't go through that. I just eat like almost every meal in my own house. So then you have 100% complete control, and then you have to worry about that. So with respect to, I got to ask you a question, because what do you think is the most common source of seed oils or linoleic acid specifically in the diet? It's a surprising source, which is why I want to mention it.
No, I don't know.
It's what many people perceive as a very healthy food, chicken.
Okay, but I don't eat meat, so that's probably why.
Okay, I didn't know that. So anyway, but it's chicken. It's probably the most popular meat in the country because of its price and perception as a health food. It's not. So chicken's not a good food.
Is it not because of its natural compounds, or is it not because of the feed and how it's produced?
It's because of the feed and the way they're raised, because they're monogastric animals, and when you feed a cow seeds, they can metabolize linoleic acids. Chickens and pigs can't. They can't. So it builds up in their tissue, and they could have like 20% of the fat in a chicken. So actually white meat would be healthier chicken, because they say it because it's low fat, but because the fat in chicken is really bad. So, but I would just stay away from chicken completely. In my view, if you choose to eat animal foods like I do, then bison's probably the healthiest, and lamb follows shortly after that. So those are the key things for seed oils. And obviously you want to stay away from any seed oils. If you have them in your house, I usually tell people, does anyone have these in their house? And half the audience usually or more raises their hands, says, well, you want to close your eyes, think of a relative or neighbor that you really don't like, and give them the seed oils.
So I have to ask you a quick question, because you said you and that's it's a choice, obviously. Is it a health conscious choice? You say you eat animals, you eat animal
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I'm a firm believer that in an ideal situation, and I don't disparage, or one of my best friends in the world, a woman I love deeply beyond imagination, is a vegan, or vegetarian for sure. And I love her. So I never argue with her about the issue, because everyone is free to make that choice, and she does it for ethical reasons, and I respect that. So, but if you're doing it for health reasons, I think there's unbelievably overwhelming, compelling evidence that there's nutrients in animal foods that you just can't get anywhere else. And yes, you can achieve levels of health that are pretty close, and the average vegetarian is eating much, much healthier than the standard American diet. So it's kind of unfair to compare it to that. But someone who's eating an optimized animal food diet, there's nutrients like carnosine and carnitine and vitamins like vitamin B12 that are really only found in animal food. So it does well for me, and I think we were historically, that was what our ancestors ate. So it's and for people who are interested in exploring that, a good friend of mine who lives in Costa Rica is Paul Saladino, and he's got a website called the Carnivore MD. He's a physician, and really is probably known as the leader in helping people understand the value of animal food. So, but anyway, yeah, it does really well for me. Once I started getting this and adopted it, because I was more a vegetarian a few years ago back, because I thought, it makes sense that it makes, so many people, if you're committed to eating healthy, that would be the strategy. And that's the common public perception, but the reality might be something different, you know, and there's no marketing message on this, although it's interesting. This, I got to mention this for those of you who are vegetarian, you think this Beyond Meat or what, there's another one too.
Yeah,
Beyond
the possible meat and whatever they do. Yeah.
Yeah. So both, it's interesting. You can't, it's not like they're putting a 3D printer and creating this from scratch, right? They're using raw materials, raw substrates to make it. So the fat in animal fat is healthy saturated fat. And that's, you know, we can have a whole other dialogue about saturated fat, but the fat they use to make these substitute fake meats is vegetable seed oils. And no one really understands it. I figured it out because I looked at the ingredients, and it's like 30-40% linoleic acid. So instead of being healthy fats, you're getting these unhealthy fats, which is the main reason you got to stay away from those. So you can choose to be a vegetarian, but stay away from those fake meats. I mean, it's just terrible. And it's aligned and consistent with avoiding any processed foods. And your health, it will just explode once you do that. And even I mean, I was still having like protein powders and some protein bars, but within the last 6 months, I've just abandoned all of it. I'm just eating real food. That's the only food I eat, is food that's whole food. Not from Whole Foods, but you know, this.
Well, I mean, the word vegetarian, if you look at it, vegetation would really suggest that that's it. But for me, honestly, there was a lot that went into it, but I was a big meat eater. And it was now, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, something like that. And it was a process that went over a year where simply I didn't feel well after eating meat. But it was the same thing. It took a while for my mind to say, hey, this is a possibility. And eventually it just was not something I craved anymore. But I do acknowledge that there are certain times and cravings when I know when something's out of season, or when it's, especially during the winter time, when the quality of the food that I can access, because we don't grow all year yet. And, you know, that's kind of where we're going to.
Well, even in Florida, we don't grow all year.
Yeah. So
Costa Rica, you can if you got water, but not in Florida.
You know, with you know, the biodomes and all the possibilities. But what I noticed is that, I mean, and this is something we know, we have depleted, you know, with our way of agriculture, we've just depleted soil from the nutrients that we would need. And so, like you say, it is virtually impossible to get that just from a vegetarian diet. And we know that it's become very hard in most places in the world. That's at least, you know, my observation.
Yeah, but there's another aspect you have to be concerned about, because there are poisons literally in many vegetables that ostensibly are healthy. And I can think of specifically one called oxalates, but there's also lectins and these oxalates are basically unknown in most vegetarians. Like things like healthy, that are considered healthy, like spinach, kale, almonds, walnuts, you know. Now, it doesn't mean you can never have them, but if you have a large portion, that can radically damage your health over time. And oxalate poisoning and the toxicity is not something that's well known at all. There's only one obscure clinician, Sally Norton, who's actually, she's written a book, but I don't think it's published yet, about the oxalate toxicity. So getting those things out of your diet, many vegetarians who wind up getting sick from these things, when they go off of them, that's one of the reasons they feel so much better. But oxalates are a big issue. So that you need to be concerned about. Then, of course, supplementing the nutrients you aren't getting from animal foods, like the B12 and carnitine and B1, and there's a few others. I just don't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, there's a big issue.
So to just throw this out right now. So if you go to Mercola.com, so that's MERCOLA.com, and of course the Instagram channel, and then you have a subscription program, which I saw, and I know you featured. I think you shared one of our live streams there, and that's how this whole how this whole connection even came about. But if you go there, Inspired Tribe, you can learn a lot about myths and truths about health, about nutrition. I've been following for a while now. Once you have this information, once you read your book or Robert Kennedy's book, or David Icke's book goes even further out there. But once you do this, you still have to ask yourself, what can I do differently? How can I live my life differently? What are the things that I can do right now to affect positive change in my life, my family, my community, and subsequently the whole world? So for our viewers right now, for the Inspired Tribe that say, I see this now. Doc, what can I do today? What can I begin doing today and tomorrow? Things that I actually can change that will positively affect myself, my family, my community, subsequently the world.
Well, I think you hit on a good word, community. I mean, you have to get into a community. You can't do this solo. You cannot be a lone ranger. Community is what it's all about. Ultimately, that is one of your most important resources, is community. And that's what you do with the Inspired Tribe. So, I think you got to separate. If you haven't figured this out already, you've got to separate from mainstream media, other than just accessing it to know that they are lying, full out lying to you. So if you can access it to see, well, what are they trying to confuse or deceive people about today? Okay, fine, because I look at the New York Times every day, but just as a point of reference to see where they're going, not to be enlightened in any way, shape, or form. So separate from mainstream media for sure. And then and identify channels. There's many good people out there like yourself. I think we do a good job. Robert Kennedy's The Defender is great. Steve Kirsch has a free Substack, and you can. The guy's a maniac. He must put out 5 to 7 pieces a day. I don't know how he does it. It's like a full-time job. And actually, I'm in a group where we meet once a week. I meet with Steve, Peter Mercola, Chris Masterson, and Robert Kennedy, and there's a few others.
That sounds like a really good group to meet with.
It is a good group. So, and we brainstorm once a week on Monday night. But there are great people out there. So if you plug into that as a resource to get educated, learn, what the details are, so you cannot be confused. I would be careful about burning bridges between your friends or relatives and pushing it, because you have to understand they're so effectively propagandized that, and this mass formation is so powerful, you're not going to break through. More than likely, you're only going to create an enemy. This great friend I have, her parents are, thankfully, my parents were totally never bought the narrative, and they passed away, thankfully, before COVID. But her parents are not, and her mother is dying from cancer. And her biggest challenge, and I support her and encourage her about this, because her mother is dying, she's getting chemotherapy, and to not just to love her, support her, because she made her choice. It is not going to do anything to improve your relationship with her. She's going to be dead in a few months. Why would you want to, but she's got this internal struggle going, because she knows what they're doing there. And, but she believes it. So everyone has their choice. So I think, that's sort of an extreme example, but there's variations of it. And integrate some of the recommendations I've recommended. I've written a wide variety of books, like Fat for Fuel would be a good one. Effortless Healing, another good, powerful tool that kind of goes over in greater detail. And normally I would just say, go to my site. My site was free, and we didn't discuss, but in August, I was forced to delete 15,000 articles from my site. We're gradually restoring many of them to Substack, but it has to be behind a private membership association to give us these legal protections, because they really came out hard after me. Did you see the CNN hit piece they did on me?
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh, okay. So they stalked me at my office. I wasn't there. And then they drove hundreds of miles to my home and stalked me outside of my home and tried to get an interview with me. And
which is extremely, a bad situation for you. But as I said, it's honestly a badge of honor.
Oh, I know. It was great. We both boosted our book to #1 at the end of the interview. They said, "Oh, and his book is #1 on Amazon, but I can't tell you the name."
Because they don't read it. They don't, because they could change your minds and hearts. It does happen. Yeah.
So anyway, where was I going with that? So because of the pressure I had from the media and this focus on me, and it's still unclear to me why they're focusing on me specifically. And anyway, that was a tangent to explain that the content I would normally tell people to go to my site, because it was all free. It was all free for 24 years before we pulled it down. Most of my videos that I've done hundreds and hundreds of videos. They're going to be all on BitChute, so you can go there and learn a lot from these videos. We should, within the next few weeks, most of them should be up there. We just kind of compiled them and put in the process of uploading them. So those are free. And the Substack articles, there's a $5 a month membership fee that we have to charge. So otherwise, we don't lose our legal protections. So that's one way. But there's other good sites out there too about health. And that's all I focused on for the longest time. And everything's shifted the last 2 years because you have to triage, and people staying alive and protected was kind of a higher priority. But we're kind of gradually shifting back to some of these foundational strategies, and I'm starting to introduce more basic health content into it. But we resurrect our articles from the past. So every day we have 3 articles, mostly focusing on COVID, but one that comes up with the past about a health article. So you subscribe to the newsletter, you can get that there. But, as I said, we're not the only place. There's certainly other good people, but just understand, learn, become curious, experiment with yourself. Your body knows what is right for you. 100%. Don't rely on someone else. Don't rely on me to tell you. Your body will give you the wisdom that's your guidepost, your feedback system that will tell you if you're doing good. But you have to be open to that and sensitive. So, become resilient. And I think there's probably a few important others I'm forgetting, but those are the ones that come to mind now.
And that is, to me, the measure of someone who's authentic, real, is you say, ultimately it's you, it's your gauge, it's your intuition that's going to tell you where to go, what to do. But we have so many beautiful people like yourself who help, who give experience, who give advice, who can, and who walk the talk. You walk the talk. You're a living, breathing example of your own teachings. And you show others how to do it. I do have one last question for you. And I know a lot of people would love that. Have you ever considered running for office or getting involved in a political leadership position? We could use people like you in those positions.
Yeah, I was actually invited to run for the Republican senator from Illinois, I don't know, a decade ago or so. And it took me about a half of a microsecond to say no, because to me, politics is an enormous way to say stuff. And actually, I phoned a conversation with a previous senator from Illinois who actually preceded Barack Obama. And I told him about that it was the first time we met. He's a Peter Fitzgerald, and he's the he has a bank, which is he contacted me because one of the side effects is they eliminated him by banks. Their bank said, "You're gone, 3 weeks, find a new bank." Oh, great. What do we do? So anyways, this Peter contacted us, and I told him that, and he said, I think you're right. It was a giant waste of time. Because it's just so frustrating. Your hands are tied. It's not about politics. Not that you shouldn't vote or anything, but I have enormous admiration for people who are committed to it. We certainly need people in that. For me, I'm just hyper frugal with my time, and I just can't. It would drive me wacky to waste all that time doing it with no results. So I could not do it. And then plus, I would never get elected because they have discredited me and disparaged me so effectively. There's no way that I would ever have enough resources to counter the discrediting campaigns. Look what they've done already. And I'm not even running for office. So yeah, they would blow me out of the water for sure. But so that's, it's a pretty easy decision.
Well, if you ever change your mind, you have the Inspired Tribe platform, at least as a small contributor to this. And the reason why I asked this, and I understand you've been a leader for, like you say, a quarter of a century and longer. You are doing your great part in this. So that there's no question about it. But it is an encouragement because we have all, no matter if we come from the spiritual field or like you, a holistic medicine approach and real health, there's been this, we all felt this way for the longest time. That's just a horrible field. There's nothing you can do in it. It's toxic, it's poisonous, it's a waste of time. But I remain, especially right now, I think we see a beautiful movement of everyday people, starting from the school boards to their, municipal governments to other positions, everyday people that are fed up. And then on the other hand, they'd say, we could do this a lot better. So I do encourage, which we've never done before, but we do encourage everyone who has that ambition with a good.
probably one of the most important components. It's not my passion. It is absolutely not my passion. My passion is getting as healthy and teaching people to be as healthy as they can. And this is why I'm pretty good at it, because I am beyond passion. I have a tech passion too, but I don't have a political passion. Even though our Substack, when you go to Substack, if you've ever been there, I don't know, but you can see the categories. Do you know what category they put my website in? My newsletter? Political. We told them we're a health site. No, you're political. Oh, great. But the primary reason I think I chose not to be in that was it's not a passion. And what I've learned, a few things, and one of them is that if you want to be successful, stick to your passion.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Exactly. Dr. Mercola, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Well, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I love what you do. I'm just so grateful that you listened and are following it and helping so many people. So you keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. What is the best way on social media? I think Instagram is a very popular site to find you. Where else can our viewers find you and connect with you?
Well, the best way is actually our website, Mercola.com. Even though we don't have a lot of content up there, you can subscribe to our newsletter, and we do have content. It's just not a lot now. We have 6 articles that are available because we publish every day. We have 3 articles and they're available for 48 hours. And then we transfer them to our Substack to insulate us from lots of liabilities that the mainstream is seeking to throw at us. So it seems to be an effective tool for now. So that's the best way is the newsletter, Mercola.com.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Inspired Tribe. Thank you so much for watching, for being here with us. Please do connect with the doc. I'm inspired by his way of inspiring us when I look at his Instagram to think, do our own research, and really engage, with the questions he asks, and especially with the wisdom he delivers afterwards. So it's a beautiful and wonderful thing to do. Thank you for being here with us, and we'll be here again very soon with another inspired conversation. Meanwhile, check out our live streams, our daily videos, and be and stay inspired.